My name is Ralph Williams, and this is the fourth in a series of videos that's trying to understand the popularity of Donald Trump. I need to say, and I should have said earlier, that I'm not advocating his policies, nor am I trying to justify who he is. I believe he's a man with many flaws, and like most of us, those flaws are self-made. During the election, I continually told my wife that I was not voting for Donald Trump so much as I was voting against Hillary Clinton. And that said, I continue to believe that keeping her out of the White House is the best thing we could have done for our country. But most people I have met and talked to at length seem to either love Donald Trump or hate him. There is no middle ground. However, when you press people as to why, most of them don't seem to know. A great many opinions are based on one policy or one statement, and not a collective whole of what he's done so far as president. Most people, either for him or against him, can't name more than 4 or 5 things he's done since taking office. In the last video, I talked about a shift that's taken place in our country, where our political fabric has shifted to the left, Democrats, Republicans, and everything in between. Today's Republican Party has shifted into what we would have called moderate territory 15 to 20 years ago, and I don't think a moderate can be found in the Democrat Party today. Today's Democrat Party is firmly in the territory of the far left. Several key shakeups in the Democrat Party have increased my concern lately that the party itself has slid squarely into the center of no man's land. The most notable of these is the election of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the socialist candidate from Queens. I was also amused by an article on BuzzFeed recently that expressed confusion and amazement that no one is standing up in defense of Maxine Waters. The gibberish that keeps coming from the left even has a lot of its own people fleeing. The hashtag walkaway movement is one piece of evidence that the left has finally outdone itself and has started to implode. But I also shared in my last video that I have an even greater concern that the Republican Party is going to try and view these as Republican wins instead of Democrat losses. I don't know why, but for some reason I have a cartoon picture in the back of my head with leaders on both sides sitting at the table, unbeknownst to the other, and each saying, "Everything is going according to my evil plan," and then maniacal laughter ensues. The Republicans would love nothing better than to continue doing business as usual in Washington, D.C. But the fact is, business as usual is the last thing they need to be doing at this moment. If both the Republicans and the Democrats are not careful, we're going to be looking at a whole bunch of new faces that we've never seen before, and quite frankly, we don't want to. The problem we have at this point is a blending, or maybe a complete doing away with traditional labels. It doesn't help us anymore to talk about Republican or Democrat values. Even the terms right and left have become clouded because the right has moved into left territory and left has moved into the far left, and it remains to be seen what will move into the area where the right used to be. The term alt-right just might be a good descriptor because alt is short for alternative or something other than what the right stands for. The left disavows the term alt-left, saying that it does not even exist. They want to simply have one big left family. But I believe that there are those who are further left than others, so I use the term. It's time to re-examine our terms and redefine the entire political spectrum, and that's what I want to do in this video. The only terms I'm going to use here, or try to use, are the terms right and left, and those will be relative to the chart that I'm going to present, not the ideologies that we currently speak of with right or left. This idea is by no means original to me. I didn't think it up. I wish I had, but and I do think that it's a great way to illustrate the point. I've listened with amusement when talking about the state of Venezuela, and people have actually said, yeah, but American socialism is different. I'm going to show you why it's not. There also seems to be great difficulty as to whether Adolf Hitler and his National Socialist Party belongs on the left or right, as we have traditionally defined it. Apparently nobody wants to associate with Hitler. The funny thing about it is that he was a very charismatic, very likable guy, at least most people seem to like him, right up to the point where he incinerated 6 million Jews and went off the deep end and committed suicide in a bunker. And then for some reason he wasn't so likable. Karl Marx, on the other hand, was a very bitter individual, and we can't even begin to estimate how many people have been killed under Marxist regimes. Far more than 6 million, but hey, who's counting, right? So, likable Hitler, we don't want him. Hateful Marx, bring him on. I don't get it. But to try and explain things better, I'm going to present a different viewpoint. This is the basic political spectrum. It's not based on right or left ideology or liberal or conservative values, but rather it has to do with how much or how little government control there is over the country. Sometimes it's referred to as the coercion continuum. At the right, you can see anarchy, or no government control at all. At the other end, all the way to the left, you can see total government control, which is usually a monarchy or dictatorship. People have tried to talk in terms of a benevolent dictator or soft dictatorship and so on. I'm not debating ideology of whether that's a good idea. I think total control is total control, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. Good, bad, or indifferent, total control does not seem like a desirable form of government. The good news is that it doesn't actually exist in this form. The bad news is that what does exist is just as bad. Look right next to it. Here we find oligarchy. Oligarchy is not a term we hear much anymore. It means rule by a few. Pure monarchy does not actually exist because it's far too easy to kill a person or do away with a single ruler. Usually, there's a king or queen or a dictator who surrounds themselves with a small council of advisors, a group from whom they take advice, a group of generals or a cabinet, call it what you will, but it's a small group that determines policy and direction of the government. So a pure monarchy or a pure dictatorship does not actually exist, but rather, for practicality's sake, gives way to an oligarchy. Here's where we would include totalitarian regimes such as North Korea, Cuba, China, Venezuela, as well as those of the past such as Stalinist Russia, Hitler's Germany, Mussolini's Italy, and Pol Pot's Cambodia. There's also a host of others, but these are the ones that I think are most notable. Next to oligarchy, we have democracy, which is ruled by a majority. Sometimes folks like to say that it's ruled by the people, but that's not entirely true. It's ruled by majority. The best description I've ever heard of a democracy is that of 2 wolves and a lamb voting on what to have for lunch. The downside to a democracy is that it lacks control. It relies on the feelings of people to decide what they're going to do. And when the majority takes on momentum, it can get out of control very quickly. I remember hearing it said that no one's life, liberty, or pursuit of happiness is safe while the legislature is in session. If we have a pure democracy, then this sentiment is very much true. All it takes is a majority vote to do away with even the Constitution itself. Democracies are usually good at replacing things, but not so good at fixing them when they are broken. Next to the democracy is a democratic republic, which is what we have in the United States. It's often described as living under the rule of law. Each state has representation in order to ensure that the smaller states have just as much say-so as the larger states. So we have a House of Representatives in addition to a Senate. The Senate ensures the democracy and the House ensures the republic. This form of government ensures that everyone's voice is heard and not just the ones with the loudest voice, the majority that would overrun the minority without the minority being heard. Finally, all the way over at the right is anarchy, which is government by no one, a lack of government. This is where you see dystopian societies in the movies, where no one is in control and everyone does what they see fit. There's always a lot of looting and rioting and burning things. Think of the Mad Max movies. Anarchy as a form of government does not work for long because the strong prey on the weak and no one has a chance to enjoy any freedom of any kind. There are no opportunities for travel or venturing far from home, even to work in the field, because the only thing you can protect are the things you can see at the moment. Peaceful people get tired of this, so they at least put together a neighborhood watch or they elect a sheriff. People will always try to bring order out of chaos, even if the government won't do that for them. And so they will put a government of their own in place. That's no longer anarchy. Anarchy is usually best seen as a transition between governments, where control is taken from a government deemed unpopular or unworthy. Lawlessness is allowed to rule for a while so that citizens can see the need for government while the remnants of the old government order are being swept away. By the time this is accomplished, citizens will usually welcome any form of government, particularly one that can bring order out of the perceived chaos. This order, interestingly enough, is always brought by the group seeking to come into power. And so it was said in pre-World War II Italy that Mussolini's party would be the one to make the trains run on time, because people will always exchange liberty for security. They will exchange the inconvenience of instability for the convenience of government if it can bring about that stability. The irony is that aside from a few trains that Mussolini used to show off to visiting dignitaries, his party didn't actually make the trains run on time at all. Anarchy is what Maxine Waters and her ilk would like to see happen so that American people will be begging for more government control. In her mind, and the minds of people like her, this means more socialist government control. This is why gun control should never be a matter of Second Amendment debate in Congress, but rather it should be a matter decided by the citizenry themselves. If you want a gun, go through the process and buy a gun if you can. If you don't want a gun, don't buy one. If you want your place to be a gun-free zone, put up a sign and let the criminals know. They won't have any problems here. But citizens should never give up their rights in any way to any form of government, no matter how benevolent that government seems. So regardless of which side you're on, Democrat or Republican, we can see that one direction moves us toward larger and tighter controlling government, and the other side moves us away from any government control of any kind. So regardless of which side you're on, Democrat or Republican, we can see that one direction moves us toward larger and tighter controlling government, and the other side moves us away from any government control of any kind. This is why American socialism is just as bad as Venezuelan socialism or any other kind of socialism, because it takes away rights from the citizenry, the people of the country. We're going to talk more about the issues of socialism in the next video, but basically, to paraphrase former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, the problem with socialism is that you eventually run out of other people's money. We need a certain amount of government, but only insofar as it benefits the citizenry. The framers of our Declaration of Independence believed that God gives us the basic rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That is the reason the Founding Fathers, in their wisdom, gave us a democratic republic and not another monarchy. They believed that totalitarian regimes and oligarchies are to be avoided, as are pure democracies and anarchy. Only the democratic republic offers a true middle ground with a balance of freedom and control. But the driving force of a democratic republic is not to be found in its elected servants, but rather in the continual effort of its individuals to exercise responsibility and common sense. Rights must always be paired with responsibilities. The story goes that when Benjamin Franklin came out of the meeting in which our Constitution was ratified, a woman asked him, "Sir, what did you give us?" He replied, a republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." I've heard a lot of people say, "I hate labels. I don't want to be labeled, and I don't like labeling anybody else." Well, folks, I believe we are living in a time where labels are more important than ever. But I'm coming to believe that our labels need to be redefined. The old ones, Democrat and Republican, conservative and liberal, are inadequate for the task at hand. I believe that for the time being, and at least through the next presidential election, there are only two labels that matter. Are you a constitutionalist or a revisionist? The revisionists want to apply Darwinian evolution to every aspect of life, including government. Therefore, they see our Constitution as a document that evolves and changes. Therefore, Supreme Court justices are needed to interpret and reinterpret the Constitution, and this usually results in what's called legislating from the bench. The law, in other words, may not mean now what it meant then. Constitutionalists, on the other hand, refer back to the Founding Fathers for guidance and intent. They see the Constitution as a static document, unchanging, and usable as a fixed point of reference. Supreme Court justices are supposed to decide current cases in light of the law as it was given. I'll discuss this further in the next video, but for now I'll close by saying that I oppose any move to give up rights guaranteed by our Constitution, including freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from illegal search and seizure, and the right to bear arms. I'm Ralph Williams, and that's the view from my front porch.